Dr Adrian Macey was New Zealand's first climate change ambassador and this country's representative on numerous climate change negotiations, now Senior Associate at Victoria University's Institute for Governance and Policy Studies. He believes the President's public rationale for withdrawing from the agreement simply doesn't stand.
Well, I think he said it himself. Jobs, unfair burden placed on the US. But in fact, I think the real reasons don't seem to be terribly rational, because just taking the jobs point, which I think was the major one, everyone assumes that he wants to try to revive the coal industry. I don't think it's possible to revive that coal industry or the fossil fuel industry unless you dump massive subsidies into it. And just talking about jobs, it's very interesting figures coming out recently. For example, already in renewable energy, there are 5 times as many jobs as there are in the fossil fuels area, and it's renewables, wind and solar, that are real job creation factory. I think the figures I saw very recently were that jobs are being created in those industries 12 times faster than in the US as a whole. So I don't think one can look for terribly rational reasons for this change.
And in terms of his suggestion that there is the possibility to renegotiate and get more favourable terms for the US and re-enter, that's just simply not feasible in any way, shape or form, is it?
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think there possibly is some scope to renegotiate or restate their target. I mean, the Paris Agreement itself is legally binding, and if you want to be in the agreement, you have to have a target, or this NDC, National Determined Contribution. That itself is not legally binding. So theoretically, yes, there would be some scope to change that. I have to say that it's interesting, one thing that he didn't say in his address was that climate change is a hoax, so we do nothing about it. He is actually accepting that climate change is real and that the US has got a role in doing something about it. So that may be some progress over what we might have feared a few months ago.
It's interesting to see that in some respects this seems to be galvanising people behind the Paris Accord, so that all the other countries, excluding Nicaragua, Syria and the United States, who remain committed to it, seem increasingly more committed to it as a result of the kind of publicity that Trump's departure is giving it.
Well, absolutely, that has been the reaction, and the obvious fear and worry had been, well, if the US pulls out, the world's richest country, or one of the world's richest countries, second biggest emitter, then why should we make an effort? But in fact, the reaction has been quite the reverse. And I think one point that people probably often don't realise is that we would never have had the Paris Agreement had it not been for US and China leadership. It was those two, what I call the G2, that got that agreement done, with, of course, brilliant work by the French. So what's happened now is that at the top level, if you like, at the leadership level of climate change internationally, there's a vacuum. And I think you can see that other countries and groups are stepping in to fill that vacuum. The EU, who have not been, they've been very ambitious, but perhaps not always too effective in the negotiations. They're clearly now stepping up. China has restated its vocation to be, or its wish to be a leader. And others like India, I think, are using the US exit, yes, to reassert their interest and their potential role in stepping up. So you're looking at a situation where the climate leadership will be taken away from the US, and the US will suffer quite a large loss of influence, I would think.
And is the influence a key factor in China's leadership here? What's driving China's increasingly strong commitment to the goals of the Paris Accord?
Well, I think it's at a very deeper level. It's a much deeper level. It's China asserting, if you like, its political influence around the globe, and this is an excellent vehicle for it. China is also a leading investor and innovator of renewable energy technology, so they stand actually to gain a lot from this. So I think that you are seeing, and the Chinese leadership have been quite explicit about the fact that they accept that as the world's major emitter, the biggest emitter, it is their role to play a full leadership role. And if they can't partner with the US, then clearly they'll be partnering with other countries.
So that was our first ever climate change ambassador talking to us from the corridor at Radio New Zealand.